Toldot deals with the brachos that Yaakov Avinu was given by Yitzchak Avinu when Yaakov Avinu dressed up as being Esav. And the bracha that he was given is V'yiten l'cha Elokim mital hashamayim u'mishvanei haaretz. The English in 1b, and may Hashem Elokim give you the dew of the heavens and of the fatness of the earth and abundant grain and wine. Rashi on V'yiten l'cha Elokim says, what does the Vav come to teach us? The connector. Because beforehand, really, it's a question. Rashi brings us a second interpretation. Really wasn't stated bracha. So Rashi begins as the first interpretation. V'yiten l'cha, Hashem will give you, and will give again. V'yiten, and will continue to give you. So we need to understand, what is this idea that Yitzchak Avinu is giving a bracha to Yaakov Avinu, and he says to him, Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to give you a blessing, and then he's going to continue to bless him. What is the necessity of having a blessing and then continue to bless him? It's as if the blessing is conditional, and God has to re-bless each and every time. And this is particularly difficult to understand, because when Esav comes in thinking that he's going to get the blessing, and Yitzchak Avinu says, sorry, somebody dressed up as you, and I've already given him the blessing. And Esav says, but don't you have any blessing left for me? And Yitzchak Avinu gives him the bracha, behold, in 1c, 39, of the fatness of the earth shall be your dwelling, and of the dew of the heavens from above. By your sword you shall live, and you will serve your brother, and that's only when your brother is deserving. When he's not deserving, you can throw off the yoke. But here we don't have the idea of natina, of giving. It will be Yeh Moshavecha. It's a stated fact. We don't have by Esav this idea of God will give you the fatness of the land and will re-give you the fatness of the land. It's a given. He will give it to you. How do we understand this idea of giving and re-giving? In order to appreciate the 2 approaches I'd like to take on the last page at the end, I'd like to do a little bit differently. It's to go through a mahalach, to go through a process of trying to understand the whole world views of Yaakov and Esav, the dynamics between Yaakov and Esav starting from birth, and then have an appreciation of why the brachas were given in this particular way. In order to do this, we need to go back to the birth of Yaakov and Esav. And here the birth itself raises quite a number of questions. When we look at the text in 1a, and when her term to bear grew full, then behold, there were tu'umim b'vitna, there were twins in her womb. And the question we have to ask right here is, what's the purpose of Yaakov and Esav being twin? If there are children that are born as twins, there must be a reason for this. What is the reason Yaakov and Esav daf got to be born as twins? The first one emerged red, entirely like a hairy mantle. So they named him Esav. We need to understand, why do we have the description of Esav the way he was born? And Esav is really called based on how he looked, Asui, fully formed. Is that not a strange name to give a child? And after that, his brother emerged with his hand grasping onto the heel of Esav. So he called his name Yaakov. And this is equally as strange. Why do we need to know the fact that Yaakov Avinu was holding onto the heel of Esav? What significance does this have for us? And even more so, Yaakov Avinu is also called by the event of his birth, Yaakov, heel. Also very, very strange to understand. So we need to also understand, why is it that Kadosh Baruch Hu had Esav born first and Yaakov afterward? If Yaakov was the one who was destined for the bracha, make him first. Which just begs the overall question of, why was it necessary that Yaakov even had to dress up in order to get the blessings? Why couldn't God have given a Ruach HaKodesh, a divine command to Yitzchak, like he gave the prophecy to Rivka, that Yaakov deserves the blessing? It would have saved us all these problems and all this hatred for so many thousands of years. Why was this particularly done in this order? That Esav is first, that Yaakov has to get the blessings in such a trickery type of way. And then we come into the story of how we find that Yaakov one day is simmering a soup a stew, and Esav comes from the field and he's exhausted, and he asks him to give him some soup because he's exhausted, and Yaakov says, sell the birthright to me. Equally a very perplexing story. Why do I need to know that Yaakov was making this stew? How is it possible even to sell a birthright? You're the Bechor. You can't say, well, I'm selling my rights to the birthright. This is what you have. This is from moment of birth. How do we explain this? So obviously there's a lot of questions, a lot of difficult things to understand within this particular section. I think to be able to get at least one approach, and obviously there's a tremendous amount that's written about all of these questions, to get some type of understanding. There's a very beautiful Chasam Sofer. The Malbim says likewise, as well as other Mefarshim, quoted in Shvilei Pinchas. The yesod that we're going to work with, the fundamental principle is